Have you ever interacted with someone where you sensed that something was amiss with the situation? Did you feel or did you get the idea that someone was withholding information from you? Now, everyone withholds information, but sometimes there is information that you shouldn't withhold from someone. Let's say you have a therapist, okay? And this therapist is there to help someone recover from some trauma. But let's say that this individual is in a quote-unquote romantic relationship that's dysfunctional. Now, the therapist is not aware of this. So the therapist keeps treating the individual. But later the therapist found out that the individual didn't tell everything. And then the therapist realized why the individual did not recover. Because the individual kept herself in that negative situation. First, she was away from toxic parents, and now she kept herself around the toxic boyfriend. But she didn't tell the therapist anything. So the therapist concluded that he was being used by this client, or by this patient. Patient is the correct word. So the therapist reported this to his superiors, and the superior above him told him to stop the therapy because the patient violated the agreement. The patient was obliged to be real and direct and transparent. Because the superior, the boss of the therapist, told the therapist, listen man, this patient of yours, she's using you and she's using us just to relieve herself. She doesn't want any help. She just wants to use you so she doesn't have to face things. And later she can also accuse you of sexual intimidation or of some kind of violation didn't happen, and because she's a woman and she plays a victim, they will likely believe her. So she eventually will bring harm to both you and this office. So, according to the protocol, stop the therapy. Tell her she doesn't have to come anymore. If she paid, then insurance company will deal with it. And we will report this. Just in case later she decides to take actions against us, because that's what narcissists tend to do, then it's reported that she lied to us. Now, that example that I gave onto you is a bit extreme, but such things happen in daily life, where people interact with you just because they want to unload their frustrations, or they want to withdraw good quality from you. So it's all about them. It's not about you. They couldn't concern themselves less about you because they're not even thinking about you. You're there, you exist, they know this mentally, but they're not into you, they're not into anyone else, they're only into themselves. You have such folks out there. Now let me say it like this. Worldly people in general are like this. They're just not extreme in it because they still have empathy. When they realize they messed up, they may have difficulty admitting they were wrong, but they will recognize they're wrong and they will alter their behavior. They will acknowledge they've been wrong to themselves. But there are folks who turn into reprobates because they never want to admit anything on their behalf. Now, whether someone is just narcissistic, that is how common people are, or someone is a narcissist directly, it doesn't matter. As a believer, you need to be alert concerning your interactions. When you sense when your inner radar goes off that something is amiss with the interaction, then something is amiss with the interaction. You don't know what is wrong. You don't see everything. The Holy Spirit will not reveal to you always what's going on. But this is what you ought to do. When you realize that an interaction, where it's just a small conversation or face to face, or it's a conversation through WhatsApp or through Facebook Messenger or through the phone, whatever it is, or maybe it's a business transaction where you receive let me say, mail from your business partners, or maybe it's the government, or maybe the local authority sending a message to you. Whatever it is, the moment you notice that your inner radar goes off, pay attention to it. In the world, unbelievers often ignore their inner radar, and they end up in situations they could have easily avoided. Some end up dead, so they don't even have the time to realize that they should have known better. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes you just don't know any better, okay? Sometimes you just can't know. Sometimes you're just victimized, okay? That's nothing to do with you. But if your alarm goes off, then your responsibility and obligation is to pay attention to it. Look, if you're in a room and suddenly you smell smoke, what's the first thing you do? You will mention, does anyone smell smoke around here? And then people are going to look around, because you can't smell smoke without fire. So there's fire somewhere, something is burning. So then you're going to look what's burning around here, and then you find out that either it's a stove that is burning some meal, or it's the oven, someone left something in the oven, or maybe there's a power circuit that happened somewhere and now there's fire. Whatever's going on somewhere, something is burning. That's why there's smoke. So the moment you sense smoke in your nose, that's what people do naturally. They're going to look around and think, where's the smoke coming from? There is no smoke without fire. The same way, when your inner radar goes off, when your inner radar sounds alarm to you, I don't care how many loving and kind conversations you had with this individual in the past. I don't even care if that individual is what they consider a good person. It can be that the individual indeed has no bad intentions at all, because they're not into evil at all. You have such people, and such people are valuable because they don't want any evil. But if someone is resistant to evil, but they're not in line with Christ, that means that they can be hijacked and used by evil spirits. So let's say your name is Anita. I'm going to use an example. Your name is Anita, and you have your sister, Helma. Let me say, use the name Helma. And you and Helma are on good terms. Helma is a kind woman. She always was. She always avoids trouble. She never bothers anyone else. So she is a typical feminine, soft-spoken woman. She never argues. She's very empathic. So she does no wrong. Yes, she has defective thinking, because first of all, she was born in sin. Secondly, she grew up in the world. Nevertheless, when she's wrong, she admits it. So she's not a narcissist. She's not a narcissist at all. But let's say that one day, this sister of yours, Helma, calls. And when you're about to pick up the phone, you feel some weird sensation. Your alarm is going off. So in your body, you feel a weird thing. Now, the best thing to do is not to pick up that phone. Let's say you do pick up the phone because you think it's my sister, and she's a good person. She doesn't do anyone harm. So indeed, she doesn't do anyone harm. She's not going to attack anyone. But look at what's going on. You pick up the phone, right? And she begins to talk. And you talk to her as if nothing bad happened. A week later, you found out that someone robbed you. Now, what was going on? This sister of yours, Helma, she lacked knowledge, and she befriended some people who are narcissists, who are Jezebels. And those Jezebels were using her to get information from you. Now, she wasn't even aware that others were using her to get information from you, but it happened. So behind this Helma, there was this negative content, there was this negative force. And you, in your radar, you sense this negative force somewhere. when you noticed her call. But you thought, this can't be right because Helma doesn't do any wrong. Indeed, Helma doesn't do any wrong. But those who have a grip on her do intend wrong. And they even intend to use her to do the wrong. So, those people that used her, when they found out the information about you, about when you would be at home, when you would go on holiday, they then sent folks to break into your place. You didn't post anything on social media. You kept your comment going, what they consider private in the world, even though privacy doesn't exist, but you get what I'm saying. So what happened here? Your radar went off. Something was amiss with that interaction. You should have withdrawn yourself from the interaction immediately. You do it in a polite way, in an honorable way, of course. You're not going to unnecessarily cause any emotional injury, hurting people's feelings, all of that. You consider others, but nevertheless, sometimes you can't even consider others. When your alarm goes off, pay attention to it. When something is amiss with that interaction, remove yourself from the interaction. Straight up. Okay? There are no excuses here. You don't have that radar in you as a spirit being for nothing. And what I'm saying here is something you really need to pay attention to. Look, I'm not a police detective. I'm not a homicide investigator, because that's in the sense that that's my job. I do know that violence operates in a cycle, and as an anthropologist, I looked into crime, and I can tell you that way too often victims, whether are homicide victims, well, if someone's a homicide victim, well, there's no way they can reflect back because they're dead. But maybe they're not homicide victims, maybe they're rape victims, or maybe they're people that were set up and they ended up in jail for something they didn't do. Or maybe they were the victim of a smear campaign and now people are holding on to negative opinions towards them. And that cost them their job, their marriage, their house, and all. What I've noticed is, and I'm not joking here, 95% of the crime incidents, I'm not talking about the rituals that the shadow governments are doing, okay? Because most crime out there are rituals. I'm not talking about the rituals, I'm talking about just crime incidents. 95%, that means almost all of the crime incidents could have been prevented easily. That means most homicides, most sexual violence, most child molestation, most scamming, most crime incidents could have easily been prevented. Now, there will always be cases when you didn't know anybody, there are times you just don't know. Sometimes bad things just happen, okay, because you have bad people around, okay? So don't blame yourself. What I'm saying is, if people collectively would teach one another to pay attention to their inner radar, they would notice things immediately. But a lot of folks, they don't notice anything. Why? Because they have this narcissistic thinking, or this narcissistic attitude, better said, in which they have this tunnel vision, because a tunnel vision is a narcissistic attitude. Because you're focused on your will, what you expect. You don't look beyond your expectations. And that's the defective thinking every one of us have until we're renewed in our mind. So I'm not pointing a finger at you. I had this also. I also had to be renewed in my mind. Okay? So I'm not playing big over you here. I'm just telling you as it is. Most crime incidents and most strategies could easily have been prevented if folks were just alert, if they just looked at the bigger picture. Sometimes you have this with authority figures. I want you to think about this for a moment. When was the last time you felt joyful and excited when seeing a civil servant, whether it's a police officer or a judge or someone that works in in a judicial or branch or law enforcement, when was the last time you became excited to see them? I'm not talking about if your husband or wife or maybe your son or someone close to you is in law enforcement. Of course you're happy to see them because they are relatives of yours, but I'm not talking about that, okay? Neither am I talking about if you grew up with certain individuals and they turned out in such professions. I'm not talking about that. Complete strangers wearing uniforms come to you. When was the last time you were joyful and excited to receive them? Please tell me. Well, a lot of folks don't feel comfortable around such people. And I can tell you why. And this is nothing against people in the judicial branch. There's nothing, the legal branch, I mean, there's nothing against people that work in law enforcement. This is just common sense fact. When you give an oath to enforce the law, and the law are the codified policies that the warlocks and wizards write down in black ink on white paper, so that's black and white reality, the moment you do that, you become attached to demonic principalities. That's why you wear a uniform that is to blind you from seeing your own individuality, because you're supposed to operate as a body when you join law enforcement. You have the chiefs who are like the brains. You have the SWAT teams who are like the hands, and you have the local officers who are like the feet. You become part of a body, okay? But who runs that body? Because every body needs to have a spirit in it to function. Now, symbolically, when you join law enforcement, you're like joining a body. But who inhabits that body? It's not the Holy Spirit. So if it's not the Holy Spirit, then who does? Evil spirits do. And that's why many of those badges that police officers wear, that's why many of the symbols that the legal system use refer to pagan gods, or refer to Apollo directly, the sun god. So every time you see someone in that uniform, your alarm goes off. That may not be because of that individual that's doing their job, because that individual may also have a family at home to take care of and all of that. Your alarm goes off concerning what's behind the individual. Okay? So just look at it this way. Every time your inner radar sounds an alarm, it doesn't have to mean that it's with the individual that's in front of you or the individual you're in contact with directly. It can be that there is something behind that individual that your alarm senses. Okay? So always pay attention to that. I've experienced this personally, that people called me or they text messaged me, but I sensed that, okay, what's going on here? And later I found out that there were people murmuring and complaining about me. They were relieving themselves at my expense, and one individual who was like an enabler amongst them, who was codependent on their approval, decided to contact me to check on information to give to those other people. Because the individual that spoke to me, or that initiated contact, they wanted the approval of those perpetrators. So they were, as they called in the conscious community, the flying monkeys of the perpetrators. I didn't know all the details, but the moment I saw their text message, or the moment they approached me with a question, I already sensed, there's something going on here. Now listen to me carefully. The moment you sense your alarm going off, look around you. And if there's nothing wrong with the individual directly, that means there's something behind the individual. The individual doesn't have to be a flying monkey or the enabler. The individual doesn't have to be involved in a plot. The individual can just be used in a plot. Okay? So don't just look at someone's character or someone's past. I know that patterns never lie, but it can be that an individual is not involved in a negative pattern, but just because you're not involved in a negative pattern doesn't mean that demons can't use you to enable that pattern. If there's domestic violence going on somewhere, it can be that someone is not supportive of some domestic violence. But if that individual has a way of thinking that people should have privacy, it's their house, their life, and all of that, then they unknowingly, when they hear about hear rumors, they will avoid talking about it. Why? Because they are conditioned to leave people alone. They're not conditioned to examine people and to take actions when things are wrong. So even when someone is not involved in a type of violence directly, that doesn't mean evil spirits can't use them to enable that same violence. That's why, listen what I'm saying here. Beware who you associate with. Now look, you're in the world. If you are in the arts, whether it's music or photography or painting, when you're in the arts, you will encounter worldly people. You will even encounter pagans. You will even encounter weird people and people with mental issues. Does it mean now that you're going to avoid all of them? Does it mean that you're going to stop being involved in the arts? No. You're anointed as an artist, so you do what you do. So you are in contact with people in the art world because you need to cooperate sometimes in projects, or when you have a project, you may need others in the art world to be involved. So you relate to people in a practical way, but don't be yoked with them. That's what I'm telling you. Okay? Don't be yoked with them. And if you do that, you're not yoked with them, but you're just being practical with them in a loving and kind way, you're very blessed. Okay? Now, what I want to say is, when you are interacting with other people, pay attention to your radar. When your radar goes off, look at the context, because your radar is designed to pick up the context of what's going on, because patterns don't lie and energy doesn't lie either. If there's negative energy behind something and you sense negative energy, and this is because the negative energy is there. If there is positive energy behind something, you will sense it also. So even if the individual in front of you is not aware of the plot, if they're just being used, you don't have to pay attention to that individual. Just examine the context. When the context is bad, you will sense it one way or the other. And it's time for believers to pay attention to the context of things. Look, whenever you encounter a situation that makes you physically unwell, even though there was no physical assault on you, that shows you that's your inner alarm going off, telling you to get out of there. When you pay attention to your inner alarm, you avoid a lot of trouble. Now, your inner alarm is not the Holy Spirit, okay? It's just a part of you as a spirit being. It works, okay? But it is not sufficient. You still need spiritual backup. And the only spiritual backup that fits you is the Holy Spirit himself. Because the other option is the paranormal, and the paranormal will trap you in danger. Okay? So whatever happens, keep agreeing with Christ and be at peace.